And as Phil mentioned, it was a fairly busy weekend on the rugby scene. Week 1 of the Heineken Champions Cup is down. 2 wins, 2 defeats for the Irish provinces. On Friday evening, Ulster got beaten 22-29 at home to Toulouse. Saturday then saw a pretty dominant performance from Leinster against Montpellier. 35 points to 14 was their winning score. And then yesterday, Connacht almost caused a big upset, but ultimately came up short against Racing 92 on a 26-22 scoreline. And Munster then got a win on the board immediately. They beat Harlequins 21-7. Alan Quinlan, as ever, is with us on a Monday. How are you, Alan?
I'm good, on now, and yourself?
All good. So Johan van Graan, not a happy man after the game yesterday. Ben Healy targeted and injured. Van Graan said it was quite clearly a tactic from the opposition to hit him late, and certain things in the game are just unacceptable. He's now got injured because of that. What did you make of all of that?
Yeah, I think he's right to be angry. Ben Healy looked uncomfortable after the 2 hits. I think the first one was from Dombrand was pretty cynical and pretty obvious. I think the second one, Joe Marler's one, didn't seem to be as much force, but he looked very unsettled after that as well. And Harlequin's discipline was shocking, really, the amount of penalties they gave away, and they had their entire back row in the bin at one stage, or throughout the game. They all got sin bins. But those 2 cynical hits, I think, were stupid, unnecessary, and they're clearly trying to, target a young player coming on the field who kicked a brilliant penalty shortly after coming on. So he's right to be frustrated and angry over that, Johan van Graan.
Will Munster be frustrated and angry that they didn't get the bonus point as well? Is it a performance that they can take away, or really, given the cutthroat nature of this year's competition, they needed that bonus point immediately?
Yeah, you could say it's in an ideal situation. You would want to get bonus point wins at home, but Harlequins are a decent side. Their last 2 results have been good for them, and they made it difficult for Munster. I think conditions weren't great. It was a bit of a stop-start game and a frustrating game to watch at times. But so I suppose, look at what they weren't as clinical as they need to be, and their attack shape, they never really got their attack going the way they would have liked to have. But it was a difficult. Harlequins made it very, very difficult for Munster. So it's kind of hard to judge were Munster poor, or did Harlequins make it really difficult for Munster? A little bit of both, but I think they will be disappointed that they didn't get a bit of momentum and drive and more flow to their game. They had chances and opportunities, but never really for a prolonged period.
Is your sense that they are trying to come up with different ways to at least beat the opposition? Granted, yesterday they didn't get into that flow state that you mentioned there. They didn't actually manage to execute as well as they perhaps could have done. But is there a sense that they're trying out new things this season?
Yeah, I think so. I think, look, since the end of last season, it ended up very frustratingly with the defeat to Leinster and the manner of the defeat and maybe the way they played. Munster themselves, a lot of kicking and slowing the game down a lot. Look, I think there were still elements of that there yesterday where they did slow it down, and a lot of it is kind of dictated by the conditions. They are trying to move the ball a little bit more. I think Johan van Graan has been braver in his selections, particularly on the bench. A lot of young players there getting the opportunities. I think to bring on Craig Casey, Ben Healy as well was, you've got to applaud him for that. And Gavin Coombs starting the game, getting rewarded. So a couple of things that have happened in the last few weeks. They've obviously been very dominant in the Pro 14. Europe is totally different. So Josh Richley coming on as well. I thought he was brilliant when he came on. So there's a number of young players kind of getting their first taste of Europe yesterday. And, I think they need to be more ambitious and really strive to move the ball a little bit more. That's what everybody wants to see. But, Europe you've got to play cup rugby as well. So it's a mixture of both. I think they did try and move it a lot, but the Harlequins made it very difficult. There's not a huge amount of household international names that jump out at you when you look at the Harlequins team before the game yesterday. But, their back row were, bar the yellow cards that they got, all 3 of them were very, very competitive, and they made it difficult for Munster yesterday to get any sort of flow.
Alan, Ben Healy is still only 21. He got 20 minutes yesterday, and obviously he was a player Harlequins were aware of if they're going to go targeting him. With JJ Hanrahan starting and no sign of Joey Carberry coming back, even at his young age, is he ready for a start? Claremont are coming to town next, or Munster are going to Claremont next weekend. Is he the sort of player you could throw into the lines then, or do you need to protect him a little bit?
It's a good question. I think it's going to be so difficult. I did the Claremont-Bristol game on Saturday for Virgin. They were astonishing, really, at times. At Claremont, there's so much power and pace and quality right across the board. So it's a very difficult task for them. But I think Ben Healy is someone that, I think JJ Hanrahan made one or two mistakes yesterday. And when he gets on the front foot, he can be very good, JJ. But I think there's been question marks around the fly half position for a while. That's the reason why Carberry came down to Munster. He's been obviously injured. So I wouldn't have any hesitation in throwing Ben Healy in there and throwing caution to the wind a little bit, because, if Munster are conservative and try and stop, if their sole focus is to stop Claremont next week, it could be a long afternoon for him or a long evening for him on Saturday evening. So I wouldn't have any hesitation in putting him in there, even if Munster were to lose. Look, the expectation is that Claremont will win the game comfortably. The form they're in and the performance they produced on Saturday, I think they'd beat most teams, if not every team in Europe, and particularly at home. But look, Munster, I think, have got to be ambitious in their selections and in the way they play. And you could argue that it's a sink or swim scenario, that he could sink there, but all Munster could struggle big time on Saturday. I'd throw him in there and I'd give him an opportunity and let him learn from it.
And that is a game you're going to be able to hear live on OTB this Saturday, Claremont against Munster. Let's talk about Leinster at the weekend. A brilliant win against Montpellier on Saturday, Alan. I guess the narrative around this was, could they exercise some of the ghosts that kind of popped up against Saracens in last season's competition? Did they do that in your view, or was there just a case of this is Leinster, they're going to do this in the pool stage regardless of who they come up against?
Yeah, I always thought that Saracens game was going to be very tricky, and given the year that Saracens had and the controversy they had, they were going throwing everything at that Leinster game, and Leinster were just caught on the day. The scrum and was the big issue and the big problem from him. I think they showed that they're still a team capable of winning this competition, and that was a very, very impressive win. You're going into the unknown a little bit. Montpellier haven't been great since the top 14 has come back. They're way down the table, but they're still a very, very powerful side with a massive squad. And I thought the way Leinster started the game, the early try from Josh van der Fleer, the penalty at scrum time, Peter Dooley, Michael Bent, there was big pressure on them. And that they're the kind of things that give a massive lift to a team. Rhys Ruddock was brilliant. I think he deserves a mention. I think he's had to trudge away, keep his head down. Would have been disappointed not to have, to have dropped off the international stage. But what a leader, what a player he is. And they were so robust and resilient and intense in their performance. They were absolutely outstanding, and blew Montpellier away. We're never in any sort of trouble or danger there. So I think they showed again that they're going to be thereabouts come the business end of this competition.
I think that Saracens game is probably going to be mentioned in the context of every game Leinster played this season, especially in Europe. And what happened on that occasion was obviously they got beaten up quite a bit up front against Saracens. Did you see anything from Leinster at the weekend that would give you hope, that would give Leinster fans hope that actually this is going to be different this year in that department, in the scrum?
Well, I just think that, playing Peter Dooley and Michael Bent, it was a big task for them, particularly when you're up against French sides away there. And like I said, the way they started, having Healy and Porter on the bench and, Ty Furlong still to come back. I do believe it was a once-off. I think if they played Saracens the week after, they would have fixed the scrum. Sometimes it just gets away from you. And Saracens, were so powerful in that scrum, and they have been dominant for the last couple of seasons. So I think the mentality and the confidence and the composure to go to the south of France like that, and you're kind of going into the unknown, shows the mental resilience and strength that Leinster have. So I think they can take a huge amount of positives from that. Kieran Frawley, Jimmy O'Brien, these guys, relatively inexperienced in Europe, played really well. Robbie Henshaw was brilliant. I think Harry Byrne coming off the bench, and Dan Levy, of course, he deserves a mention. I think having him back in the mix as well. There's so much talent in that back row. But you know, they've always said a couple of personnel changes, and the standard is still the same level, and that's what they've tried to achieve under Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster. So I think it was a one-off, and you know, if you play Leinster, if you play anyone, you're going to try and target the set piece, and it just went completely wrong from that day by a very powerful side, Saracen. So whoever they play, you know, teams will try and look back at that and say, well, we can target their scrum or go after them there. But I couldn't see that happening as badly again.
Just on Connacht quickly before we let you go then, Alan, beaten yesterday 26-22 by Racing 92. The Racing defence came up big at the end, but Connacht had them on the rack, really. If for anybody who watched the game yesterday, it was pretty clear that they were in a bit of trouble yesterday, Racing. What impressed you most about that Connacht performance?
The never say die attitude. 19-3 down after 24 minutes. They could have easily capitulated, and it could have been 40-50 points. I think they stuck at it. You know, Jared Butler going off as a blow to him, and just they grew in confidence. And Connacht are a side that, if they get their tails up, and you know, Andy Friend has done a brilliant job with them. I think consistency's probably been the key. Ultan Delan was brilliant for them. I thought they really stuck at it against the bigger, more physical side. So they can take so much out of that. Getting a losing bonus point away in France could be vital. You know, they have Bristol at home next week. Then they're away to Bristol, and then, you know, who knows? Maybe Connacht could get into the quarterfinals when Racing come in the fourth game at the end of January. So they could take so much out of that yesterday, but probably the learning point is, you know, you can't allow these French teams to be so dominant. But the quality that Racing have is just at a different level at times. So I think they can take so much out of that game, and particularly the way the last 20 minutes, they were brilliant.
Alan, great stuff. We'll chat to you again on Friday morning. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.